Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'akol niyeh bidvaro. When one reads the Torah and one reads the Bible, things that happened hundreds, thousands of years ago, it is very difficult to imagine how they really were. But think of something even more difficult. Try to place yourself there. You are there, you are in Egypt. There is slavery, hard labor. Suddenly, God sends 10 plagues. The Egyptians soften up. They send you out of Egypt. But after you are out of Egypt, you have already broken the chains of slavery. Suddenly, the chariots of Pharaoh start running after you. And what is in front of you? The sea, the Red Sea. You don't know what to do. Then God performs another miracle for you. A wind comes and separates the water. There is dry land. You are able to walk through the sea. And after you're on the other side of the river, and the Egyptians get in there to pursue after you, suddenly the waters come close together and they all drown. Imagine that. How would you feel about that? The greatest thing that God did for you, saved your life, saved you from certain death. After hundreds of years of slavery, you're finally free. Then God says to you, you know what? I have a law for you. I want to give you a law. Would you ask God what is written in that law? Of course not. He just saved you. He's your friend. He does everything for you. You are ready to do whatever He says. And that's what it says in the Torah. That when God gave the law to the Jewish people, they said, Na'aseh v'nishma. We are ready to do, and then we're going to listen. In other words, before we even understand, we're with you, whatever you say. The Talmud takes a critical view of that. And you know what the Talmud says? You know why our ancestors said, Na'aseh v'nishma? Because God took the mountain, when they were at Mount Sinai, placed them over their heads, and He said, either you accept the law, or I let the mountain drop on top of you. And this will be your burial place. What would you do in such an instance? Of course, you have no alternative but to accept. How do you interpret that? That God forces you to accept it. Well, I always thought that maybe what God is saying, there's no alternative to a law. You are free, but if you don't have a set of rules, this freedom actually will be your enemy. You have to be able to behave in a certain way. You cannot steal. You cannot murder. There have to be certain laws that obligate everyone in order to be able to live in society. But our rabbis say afterwards, no, you know what this is? This is really a notice to God that we did it under coercion. It wasn't under our free will. And they question, in other words, is this acceptance really valid forever? It was forced upon us. Let us jump 2,000 years during the Holocaust, and you see the most terrible things. You know, Elie Wiesel wrote a book called Night. Everything was darkness during the Holocaust. You didn't see anything that gave you some kind of ray of hope. Everything was gray. There was no sun shining at all. There's a story of a rabbi that came out and he was offered the fruit and he said, I don't want to eat because I don't want to recite a blessing. He didn't want to bless God after all he had seen. He had heard of a report of a Nazi, one of the guards, taking a little baby by its legs and banging its head against the wall until the baby died. After seeing such cruelty, could you still believe in God? It was a very difficult time. These are extremes. You know, either you see the revelation of God and everybody has to believe, or else you see destruction and God does not appear anywhere. You know, it is impossible to understand how it is that after receiving the 10 Commandments, after seeing the majesty, the glory of God, our ancestors went and built a golden calf. Adin Steinsaltz says that many a time after you reach an apex, a climax, what comes afterwards is a down. You know, you cannot stay up forever. And whenever there are extreme situations, the results, the responses are not really normal. It takes a time for things to become normal. Let us jump to the story of Purim. You know, our rabbis didn't know whether to include Megillat Esther in the canon of the Bible. Why not? Because God's name doesn't appear. How can you have a religious book without God's name? When did God speak to Mordechai or to Esther, the heroes of the story? It doesn't appear at all. So how can you include such a book? They also had difficulty with Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs. What's the problem there? It seems to be a poem. You know, a shepherd is in love with a young girl, and he says how beautiful she is, how different parts of her body are full of light. Is that part of the Bible? Yet our rabbis felt, this is an allegory. Don't take it on its surface. This is really the story of God with the Jewish people. It is similar to the love of somebody who is a shepherd and a beautiful young girl. So some books had this problem, and I say that the story of Purim had its problem. Take a look, what is the story? The story is that Queen Esther saves the Jewish people. How does she save the Jewish people? Well, she becomes the queen. How did she become the queen? Well, she won a beauty contest. Was she the most beautiful woman in Persia in those days? I don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no. But the king liked her. The important thing is what he liked. No one can dictate someone else who is the person that is most beautiful in his eyes. In his eyes, she was the most beautiful. And Mordechai asked her to go before the king because Haman had issued a decree by lots that in such and such a day all the Jews are going to be killed. She refused because she says the king did not call her. So Mordechai says to her, you are in this place because you are supposed to act on behalf of your brethren. If you don't, God will save us in a different way. Esther maybe realizes then that this is so. There's no accidents in this world. There must be a purpose to her being queen, and she goes before the king, and they're saved. Well, what happened in Purim? Did God save us? Or did Mordechai and Esther save us? Who did it? Maybe it was all diplomacy. Maybe it was how Mordechai understood when to go before the king, when not to go. Esther was very beautiful. There are too many circumstances. We don't know. But you know what Esther's reaction was when Mordechai finally convinced her to go before Pharaoh? She said, Lech kenoset haYehudim, go and gather all the Jews. They realized that after years of assimilation, even though she was queen, she was Jewish, and she was going to be killed together with every other Jew possibly. Who knows? They realized that the strength of the Jewish people is not in becoming like others. The strength is really the Torah. What makes us Jews is the fact that we live by the vision of the Torah. What is the vision of the Torah? The vision of the Torah is not only that there is only one God in this world. It is a vision of democracy, that every human being has equal rights. The vision of the Torah is rich, poor, it's the same. When it came to building the tabernacle, the Mishkan, everybody contributed half a shekel to show that we are all equal in the eyes of God. You have to bear in mind that the message of the Torah is a very modern message. Western society is built upon the pillars, the moral pillars of the Torah. Take a look, the responsibility of the Jewish people toward others. Only today we read of 19 Yemenite Jews somehow being saved by Israel. Jews that were apart from other communities for a couple of thousands of years, according to some, and yet they remained Jews. What bound them to the rest? They spoke Yiddish, they ate gefilte fish, they ate other Sephardic delicacies. No, that's not what unites us. What unites us is that we have a common heritage, and that heritage is the Torah. So our ancestors at the time of Purim decided, why we were able to overcome? Because we are all tied by the same Torah. So kimu vekiblu, they once again swore their loyalty to the message of the Torah. This time it was not accepted under duress, because no one was killed really in Persia. It wasn't as if everybody was decimated. A third of the Jewish people at that time had been killed in gas chambers. No. But they realized that there was a menace, and what binds them together is really the Torah. Was God present there? Well, according to our rabbis, the name of Esther means hidden. God acted behind the scenes. He may have been present, but it's not the same as the 10 plagues that he sent to the Egyptians to let our ancestors go out. It's not the same as the fire and the thunder and the lightning that accompanied the giving of the 10 commandments. It's not the same as hearing the first 2 commandments from the voice of God. It's altogether different. This time, our people resolved. So our rabbis say, this time the acceptance of the Torah is forever, because we did it of our own free will. It wasn't under duress. It wasn't because we were in gas chambers. It wasn't because we were enslaved. To the contrary, the Jews in Shushan lived very well apparently, but they realized that assimilation is not the way to go. So what binds us to the Jews in Yemen, what binds us to the Jews in Morocco, what binds us to the Jews in Poland, what binds Jews of the United States, Canada, all over, is really the Torah. So Purim, in a sense, is a celebration not only of what is written in the Megillah, but it's also a celebration of the acceptance forever of our ancestors and for future generations of the Torah, with its moral principles and the laws that permit us to continue living for so many years.